All right. Well, I think let's go ahead and get started. Nice to see everybody here. I'm Maria Lane. I'm the director of our new R.H. Mallory Center for Community Geography. And welcome to our first ever community geography workshop. We've had a couple of events, but this is our first time having a workshop like this. The Center for Community Geography got started essentially during the pandemic. So we've been very slowly working our way into in-person events and just getting some of our programming started a little more slowly than we would have, but we're excited that we are at this stage now. Just a note, we do have people in the room and of course attending remotely. We're going to talk a little bit about the center, about community geography, some of the things that we do. And we've got a whole series of presentations from folks who have done work that we funded this year. We're going to, in order to kind of manage the dual worlds of in-person and remote attendance, we're going to save questions till the end and be monitoring the chat as we go. So Cassidy, can you get me the next slide?
One second, sorry.
All right, so just to start with who we are. So the Center for Community Geography is part of the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies here at University of New Mexico. We are not an academic unit, which means we don't offer classes and we don't hire faculty ourselves, but we support academic units across campus. So any faculty member or student or department that has an interest in human environment relations, part of our job on campus is to support those folks in doing community engaged scholarship. So our primary focus right now is the Department of Geography and Environmental Studies, as well as another unit that we're associated with, sustainability studies. But we are open to and want to be supporting units across campus. Our funding is open to faculty and students from across campus, and we will soon be offering affiliations to faculty from outside our department to join us. So if you are interested in being added to our listserv, which we have just created, and there's no one on it right now except for me and Miriam, if you'd like to be added to that for announcements in the future of funding and public events, you can check the checkbox on the sign-up sheet, or you can answer this poll remotely. Thank you, Cassidy. And let's switch to the next slide, Cassidy. I also just wanted to tell you who is, let me move this to the side for our folks who are here.
You can make it small.
Oh, do I have to vote?
You can minimize it.
There we go. Okay. Okay, I can minimize this too, right? There we go. Okay. I also just want to introduce to you some of our staff in the center right now. So I already said I'm Maria Lane. I've been here in geography for 16 years at UNM. I do scholarship on the historical geography of environmental management. This is our associate director, Miriam Gayantaki. This is her second year at UNM. She arrived like full pandemic mode, and she does her scholarship on human dimensions of climate change. We also have two student staffers who are here with us. One is Desiree Loggins, who is finishing her master's this year and has been supporting us in a lot of different ways. If you've gotten communication from us in the past, it's probably been from Desiree. And then remotely, we have Cassidy Tazi Garcia. She is a first-year PhD student who's interested in food justice, mutual aid, and community resilience. And she's handling the chat and all the online stuff for us tonight. So you can see here our mission. Our goal is to help connect UNM with our community in new and creative ways. We focus on human environment issues in particular, but that covers a pretty wide range of topics. But what we're trying to do is think about, like, when we teach classes on this campus, can we do it in a way that prioritizes community needs, community questions, and community engagement? When we do research, for scholars on this campus, whether they be students in a class, students who are doing a master's or PhD thesis, or faculty researchers who are engaged with students, can we do that research in a way that integrates community knowledge, or that answers questions that are prioritized by the community? So that's kind of what lies behind this mission statement. All right, next slide, Cassidy. So just what we do in brief, and then we'll talk through the specifics of this as we go. We provide funding for classes that engage students with community. We provide funding for research that follows a community engaged model. And we host events that are meant to bring together UNM personnel and Albuquerque community members. So we've got this small team, and we are moving forward in a lot of different areas. Just to give you some specifics on what is community geography, because this may be an unfamiliar term for those of us who are here. The basic concept is that we're creating geographical knowledge, which of course is what universities do, is create knowledge, creating geographical knowledge in collaborative local contexts. That's our biggest frame. We're valuing non-academics as knowledge producers in the process and trying to build relations and capacity through the research and learning processes. Next slide, thanks. So a few key terms that we focus on that I want to share with you as you're thinking about how you might engage with us. Collaboration, to us, this means university personnel and community personnel are working together on all aspects of scholarship. So research and learning, all phases of that, we want to be attentive to engaging with community. So that includes, identifying issues, coming up with questions that need to be answered through research. We want to be doing that in a community engaged way. And that also comes down to, like, when we have findings and we're disseminating findings and telling people about our results, we want to also be doing that in a community engaged way. So that's collaboration. Knowledge is real important to us. UNM, of course, is not the only institution in Albuquerque capable of producing environmental knowledge. There's a lot of knowledge holders in this community that may know well more than any UNM researcher about an environmental issue. So through taking a community geography approach, we want to honor and acknowledge these multiple forms of knowledge in our research and our learning. And this is really different from a traditional university model, which is why we're putting a lot of energy into it. Community is not an easy word to define. Communities have many layers. And of course, UNM researchers or researchers in general don't get to decide what is and isn't a community. So we're taking a very flexible approach to what is community and saying we're here to engage in partnership with groups that want to answer questions. However you define community, however we can help you build community, we will work with that using definitions from outside UNM. And then geography, there's some geography students in the room. I won't put you on the spot with a quiz on what is geography, but in general, this is a very interdisciplinary discipline where we're looking at relationships and patterns across space. So we are in our center especially concerned with human environment relations, but geographers study many, many topics, and we intersect with a lot of different areas and methods. So next slide. To give you a sense for some key areas within geography that we're working in. Critical cartography is a subfield of cartography studies, and we now have a class teaching this. This involves doing mapping projects while paying attention to the way that maps create and enforce power relations. thinking about the ethics of mapping while you're doing it, thinking about the power that is wielded in a map, in a mapping process, or by a cartographer. So we're trying to creatively explore options for how you use mapping to highlight new forms of knowledge and build capacity for community building. A second area, community science. This is also, you may be familiar with the term as citizen science. This is a well-established model for integrating academic and non-academic participants in scientific work. So usually focusing on data collection. And then critical environmental studies or critical physical geography. This is a model for environmental science where researchers conduct their physical geography work while again thinking about the power relations that are involved in doing scientific work. So through community geography, we're trying to do this by integrating academic and non-academic knowledge producers. Okay, next slide. So just a few notes on what we consider not to be community geography. Doing research on communities without their participation or involvement in defining the objectives or the processes or the products of the research, we would not consider that community geography. It could be really important and serve a community, but the process is really important for us to be working with community to call it community geography. Similarly, research that uses local or community knowledge without permission or acknowledgement wouldn't be something we're interested in. And then again, just another flavor of that, class projects that are, for serving some community purpose, but not done in collaboration with the community. Next slide. So we invite you to learn more about how we are defining community and thinking about some of these ideas. Again, we're a new center. This is a really new model for a university to be engaging in. We have our great student staff are working right now on this community geography lexicon project. So if you follow us on social media at EdM Community Geog, you can see some of these terms that we're working with and inviting people to respond to throughout the spring semester. And at the end of the semester, once we get our entire lexicon up there, we'll post the whole thing on our website. So that's another way to engage and learn more about that. All right, next slide. So I'm going to give you a really brief overview of a few things we did last year, and then we're going to turn it over to some of the folks that we funded. So I said one of the things we do is events, and we have tried to do events that deal with community geography in two ways. One, the format of the events, we're trying to bring community and academics together. This is two different speakers that we had in over the last, these were both in 2021. And in both cases, we had a public lecture, kind of like a traditional academic talk where, 50 people come and listen. But then we also had an engagement in a class. So one of the geography faculty hosted the speaker in their class for a conversation with students, and we invited the public to come into that class session. And those have been super cool events. And so I encourage you to look for those in the future. Any student who wasn't in the class was also allowed to come, just kind of open day for that class. Everybody did a reading in advance and then shared on that. So that is one thing we're doing on events. And then of course, topically, we're choosing people who address community issues. Next slide. We also are serving as the kind of the UNM host for the City Nature Challenge, which is a big worldwide citizen science, community science event. And we coordinated the whole process on campus last year. And we helped Albuquerque beat Tucson and Phoenix, which is going to take a superhuman effort if we're going to repeat that this year. But this is coming up next month. So if you are interested in getting involved in community science, you'll see a lot from us about this one coming up. All right. We also are providing direct project support to some community partners. This is not through like a competitive funding process. This is through partners reaching out to us and saying, hey, can you help us with this? We're connecting classes, interns, or just hiring our own staff to help with mapping projects and other kinds of planning support projects. So I'm not going to talk specifically about these, but this is just two partners that we've provided direct support to. The Backyard Refuge Program, which Joe will talk about, and the Tijeras Creek Watershed Collaborative. And then the other big thing we do is that we just provide funding to all of our brilliant student researchers and faculty to take their cool community geography ideas in the classroom or out in the field, and we give them funding in order to make those happen. So that is what we're gonna now turn attention to and let folks tell us what they did with their $1,000 over the last year. And I'm gonna turn it over to Miriam to moderate that.
Great. Okay, is Leah here? So each of you will have 5 minutes. I will just start with you. Okay, so if you have to
Go super fast.
yes. And as Cassidy said, when you need the slides. to
Okay.
change this, yes, yeah.
The first slide could happen. Okay, great. So hi, I'm Leah Greaser, and I'm a student in landscape architecture, a grad student, and I'm also getting a certificate in historic preservation. So I wanted to start with a project that I worked on before the project I'm working on, just to set it up. So as a landscape architecture student, we have this an amazing thing about the discipline is we get to enact projects that are going to change landscape. And that comes with a lot of responsibility and a lot of opportunity. And so I had been working on a project at Chaco Canyon, where we were supposed to be looking at the campground. And I felt really uncomfortable with making any sort of determination on Indigenous ancestral lands about what should happen with them. So I started a process of outreach to different people who had cultural and professional ties to the canyon. Slide. And so through that process, this is just one slide of the work that came out of that. I was able to take what I'd been told and turn that into designs for the canyon. And these use both archaeologically, like restoration processes that were they're in the archaeologic record, but they're also very much being practiced today. So the designs are all formed around that. Slide. And so the work that I'm doing for my thesis is along the same lines. I'm looking at the historic mills of the Upper Rio Mora Valley in northern New Mexico and the traditions of communal land management and the potential to equitably revitalize a local wheat economy in the area. So I applied for the Community Geography Research Stipend to help me regularly visit Mora, to interview people so I could better understand the deep cultural complexity of this landscape. Slide. And so these are some of the people, just a brief overview. I have a lot of film and video that I'm still in the process of processing. But this is Harold Trujillo, who's on the upper side, who's founder and president of the New Mexico Acequia Association. He's a Parciante and an organic farmer. I've talked with a lot of people from Rio Grande Grain about how they see the revitalization potential of wheat in northern New Mexico. Gilbert Quintana, who's the president of La Mercedes de Santa Gertrudis de Lo de Mora, so land grant, and just taking all of these ideas from people who live in the area, Mora itself or northern New Mexico, about historic preservation of cultural landscapes. Slide. And then I'm still working on designs, but this is kind of what I've come out with from that process of all of these interviews is looking at placekeeping instead of placemaking, and using cultural traditions and practices in determining my design. So in terms of Resolana, looking at solar respite, designing for camaraderie, centering environmental systems, and then looking at pilgrimage, ritualized movement, seasonal migration, and somatic remembrance. and then Limpia, so ritual cleaning, participatory land tending, and communal management practice. So through what people told me was most important to them in creating designs for the valley.
Okay. And no, Joe's first.
Oops, I'm
Yeah.
the last.
Hello, everyone. So is, hold on a second. As Maria mentioned, I have worked as a project assistant for the Center for Community Geography, assisting in the development of a online mapping tool to be used by Friends of Valle de Oro and other community partners. But in terms of the $1,000 funding that I received last spring, let's see. Maria had approached a class that I was taking with Miriam, coincidentally, about an opportunity to work with EMNRD, which is the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, on a project that's related to urban forestry. Now, at the time, I wasn't entirely sure of my direction in my thesis, and so this seemed like a really good opportunity to not only learn a new method of planning, but to develop a thesis around my experiences in the planning process. Next slide, please. So first, this project was with the forestry division of the EMNRD, who primarily work with the management of the state's rural forests. But they also have worked with the Nature Conservancy and other agencies and NGOs to develop what became known as the 2020 New Mexico Forest Action Plan. This is a comprehensive plan for how to manage the state's forests, taking into consideration things like climate change, sustainability, environmental equity, and so on. You know, and at the time I did have experience with GIS, but I wasn't very familiar with urban forestry or model building. So I would be given tasks by the GIS analysts that work for EMNRD that would allow for me to apply the skills that I already had, as well as gain new skills. Next slide, please. When building the prioritization model, which is, this was what they ended up wanting, we were essentially creating a ranking of urban areas in the state. The model was built in ArcGIS. And first, we acquired statewide tree canopy cover imagery from a GIS analyst at the Nature Conservancy. Then we delineated that to each of the state's 46 urban areas. And I know that seems like a lot for New Mexico, right? But urban areas is kind of a loosely defined term here. We mean both incorporated communities like Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and Gallup, as well as unincorporated communities such as Shiprock, Chaparral, and all the Pueblo, New Mexico, and so on. So after delineating the tree canopy for each urban area, we were able to determine that area's percentage of tree cover. Our next task was to choose what variables to consider. For example, percent of the population of that urban area that earns under $30,000 a year, or percent of the population that's Black or African American, or any other race or ethnicity that we thought was important to consider. One major variable was whether or not an area had a tree board, which is a governing body that makes determinations regarding tree plantings. So after we had all of our variables, we added the values of those variables to the value of the average tree canopy cover for each area. And then the total value for each area would determine its place in the ranking. One of the reasons we built the model this way is that if someone is critical of our choice of variables, they can simply remove it or add a weight to one of the variables that they think is more important. You don't need to create a whole new model. Next slide, please. So here is the current ranking that the model generated. To the left is the actual ranking, where the top 3 areas are located on tribal land, with the exception of Chaparral, which is a small unincorporated community outside Las Cruces. To the right is a spatial representation of the ranking. The number attributed to each color represents the value totaled from the variables, with 20 being the highest rank for prioritization. So for my thesis, I've chosen to focus on the history of Gallup's urban forests and the physical and social processes that resulted in it being the most populated area on the top 10, in the top 10 places on the list. So my intention is to emphasize the importance of investigating the causes for urban forestry deficits before any tree planting decisions or planning decisions are made. So if you were like me and you're a first-year master's student and unsure of the direction you want to take your thesis, or if you just want a chance to apply your current skill set and gain new skills while helping community partners, the work being done here at the center, while in its early stages, is work that can benefit the community as well as your own academic pursuits. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. My name is Stephanie Olivas. I'm a geography student here at UNM, currently my master's. I graduated last year with I did my BA and my BS backwards on there, didn't I? My Bachelor of Science in Biology and Bachelor of Arts in Chicano Studies. I also have a little bit of background in working with community at local urban farms and community gardens and school gardens. So next slide, please. I kind of use this opportunity as like an organizing opportunity because I just couldn't help myself. So a lot of what I'm doing is reconnecting with farmers and food justice and food sovereignty organizers here in Albuquerque. I'm hoping to, let me say my research project first, sorry. So with the geography department, I am going to be assessing soil health of urban farms, hopefully with the ability to predict specifically like soil microbial activity in hotspots. And I'm taking a mixed methods approach to this because I also want to be interviewing farmers. So I'll be collecting remote sensing data, proximal sensing is sort of like my field collection data, and interviewing farmers. So with that, that's why I want to reconnect with the different folks who are on the ground, working with the soil, growing the crops, to lay the foundation together on defining something called agroecology. The perspective that I'm taking on this is looking at agroecology as like a movement, a global movement, and also how we have those same characteristics here in Albuquerque and central New Mexico, especially since we're like, as many of you probably know, we're just so inundated with like so many farmers and organizations doing soil workshops, food justice workshops, just a lot of opportunities, and there's not really a lot being written about it like academically or collecting that data and analyzing that data. And so I'm gonna take like one perspective and like one angle on this, relevant to what I'm interested in as well. And so I'll touch on later how I want to develop this framework for agroecology in New Mexico, and some of the connections I've been making and the event we're going to have actually next month. And so just like as an organizer, the goal is just like get people conversing again and like connecting, because there hasn't been a space for folks to really gather like on a grassroots level. There's been a lot of like private foundation funding or like through the state or legislator. And so on an organizing level, I see there's opportunity for us to like just get together and look at some of what we might want to do with this framework. And then I'm going to be picking out about like 5 to 10 sites to do like thorough investigations and interview farmers and collect that field data for my thesis. What I'm using the funding for, which is, it's been really nice that there aren't so many ties to what we're allowed to use it for. Because the two things you can never use funding for are to give somebody a stipend or to like pay for meals. So those are two things that I'm using some of my funding for. I'm going to be splitting the meals with some of the local grassroots organizations, and so that's been nice. And I'm going to be printing materials for farmers. Once we like finish putting together this framework and this presentation, it's going to be something that everybody can use as tools in their own organizations to talk about this, this movement and this sort of like physical science aspect of what they're doing, what we're already doing at Farms and Gardens. And then the last thing I'm going to do is put together some gift baskets or maybe a free raffle of soil assessment materials, like, giant, everything from giant measuring tapes to giant, like, I don't know if anybody's ever seen those giant soil thermometers you can stick in a compost pile that I think are so fun. So we're going to put together some gift baskets as well with some of the funding. Next slide.
If you can wrap up.
Okay. So basically what I've been doing is holding collaborative meetings with folks. I've touched base with a lot of folks on this list, and there's like so many, especially like organic farmers who aren't listed individually on here, but that's my target for reaching out to folks. And just to emphasize again, we're like inundated with resources in Albuquerque and in central New Mexico. And I'm also seeking out, seeing what other folks are doing with agroecology in northern and southern New Mexico. Of course, in their own context, because they have different communities and different ecosystems that they're working within. So there's a lot of really cool work going on statewide and within our city. Next slide. One of the collaborative meetings, I actually instead got invited to a workshop with some youth at Wilson Middle School at their garden. This was in collaboration with the the Bernalillo County Urban Ag Collaborative and their environmental justice and action series that they're doing. And so we presented 3 scenarios and we acted them out with the youth and talked about, and mine was based on agroecology as like a global movement, and then connecting that back to Albuquerque. So I had to like sort of reframe it for the youth, but still like on the same topic. And then hopefully they can come to that event next month after they've like, reflected on all these environmental justice concepts and see what they think at the Plática, which is the next slide. So this is the big event that we're planning for, like I said, again, targeted at like farmers and food justice organizers. And the framework that we're going to utilize is like defining what agroecology is as a practice in New Mexico, what it is as a movement in New Mexico. And then like even answer the question, like, why do we even want to talk about this? And then break out into focus groups and then I want to use this information to sort of develop some really strong interview questions for my thesis that we've sort of like built together as a community. And like and hopefully see like what are the best ways to frame these questions and send out in a survey to my specific 10 sites, but also, throughout the region. I probably won't be collecting remote sensing for everybody throughout the region, but at least in Albuquerque. Okay, I tried to make that fast because the last one and we're already over, but there we go.
Thank you. Sorry. And we're gonna have lightning presentations of funded classes, and this one, Marigold Walsh Dewey's class on the moment.
Hi everyone, I'm Ramona Malchinsky. I'm a second year PhD student in Geography and Environmental Studies, and I'm sort of speaking for Dr. Walsh-Dilley, just so you know. So I'll be reading a little bit of the notes that she gave me. So this project started in Dr. Walsh-Dilley's 464, 564 Food, Environment, and Society course. And Dr. Walsh-Dilley apologizes for not being able to make it. She received a small grant from the Center for Community Geography and used it on this course's unit on food insecurity. The funding was used in an online class that was occurring during the middle of COVID. So they were somewhat limited in their ability to really get into the community. But what Dr. Walsh-Dilley ended up doing was using the grant to run a competition where students developed and proposed projects that would support food security among UNM students. The idea was that the winning project would receive $1,000 to actually develop their proposed intervention. In addition to creating the opportunity to fund the development of the winning project, the grant from the Center for Community Geography encouraged Dr. Walsh-Dilley to build out more direct community engagement into her class plan as a way for students to learn what the community need is, who the relevant community actors are, and to interact with folks already working on the ground to solve this particular problem. So even though the course was online, they interacted with people at the Roadrunner Food Bank, at the Food Depot in Santa Fe, at the Lobo Food Pantry, and the Lobo Gardens. And they also had team members from the UNM Basic Needs Project judge the project proposals at the end of the course. So Dr. Walsh-Dilley received a lot of excellent proposals, and the one that the judges selected as the winner was a proposal to develop a map of food and housing resources for UNM students. The students who proposed the project didn't have the ability to keep going with that project, so Dr. Walsh-Dilley used the grant to bring me, Ramona, into the project to bring it to fruition. So now I'll tell you about that map. Next slide, please, Cassidy. Okay, so here's some basic reasoning behind the map. I had conversations with the Basic Needs Project team. I talked to UNM students here. I'm a student myself, and previous students who experienced food insecurity. I'm also on the Basic Needs Project, so I had some background information about that. And we wanted to make it a one-stop web page to decide, so people could decide which resources to access. And we wanted it to be easy to use, inviting, and have specific instructions so you didn't have to navigate multiple web pages, which if you try to look for food and housing resources, you're gonna have like 30 tabs open on your browser. So this was geared towards students, and I divided up the resources into different categories to make them easier to search through. And I had a tab with information on organizations working on food and housing justice to show that we're all in this together. And it's really about solidarity and addressing insecurity as an entire community. So Cassie, if you could click on that link. Okay, so this is what the map looks like right now. It's a work in progress. So if you know of any resources that you think I should add, please contact me or contact the center so that you can contact me. But there are different tabs here, as you can see: on-campus resources, immediate food, immediate housing, long-term food, long-term housing, and then organizing for food and housing justice. So if you could go to on-campus resources, Cassidy, just to give an example. So there's two that I know of, the Lobo Food Pantry and Women's Resource Center. If you could click on Women's Resource Center, Cassidy. I included a photo for each resource. I wanted to try to make it seem welcoming and inviting. I explained what kind of resource it is, the location, if there's transportation available, what's the eligibility, what documents might you need, and any additional info, because I really want people to just be able to show up and get what they need. If you could click on the immediate food tab, Cassidy. Yeah. Oops. Okay. And then if you could click on the first one, the TGRC. Yeah. So here's another example. The TGRC offers food bags. And so it gives you a description similar to the previous resource. I tried to make it consistent across each tab with the same type of information, where it is, what time you can get that food, who should try to access that food, and how. Yeah, and I think, I don't know how much more time.
Yeah.
Okay, that's about it, but please contact me if you have any other ideas for resources. The list is pared down specifically for students. That's why it might seem a little bit scarce, because it's not for, disabled or elderly people, but students in general. So yeah, thank you.
Hi everyone, I'm Yolanda Lynn. I'm an assistant professor in camera here.
It's right there on the stand.
Okay, in geography and environmental studies. This is just my second year at UNM. So I'm brand new and this class is brand new. So this is a new general education curriculum class in the communications area, and it's on information design. So in addition to the students building skills in analyzing graphical information and generating their own graphics, they're also getting the experience of working with a community partner. Next slide. Okay, next slide again. So they're actually working on two projects. The course is roughly divided into 1 month segments. So the first half of the class, they were really building skills and understanding best practices and the theory of information design. And the second half, which we just started, so I don't have any results to show you, but they're working with the City of Albuquerque Open Space Division currently, and they're working with a couple data sets, one of trail counter data on their foothill trails, as well as volunteer cleanup data from 2019, which is the last time they actually hosted those cleanup days due to the pandemic. So that project is going to wrap up in a few weeks, but if you are available on April 16th, I believe, not 19th, it's a Saturday morning at 8:30, they'll have coffee and snacks, and we'll be showing off the graphics that the students have created. And these graphics are going to communicate things like leave no trace and please volunteer. So they'll be displayed as flyers at the trailheads. So even if you can't make that event, they should be displayed there kind of all season. And then they'll also be shared on their social media accounts, which is at ABQ Open Space on Instagram and Facebook. Next slide.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I think I saw a comment that said you're out of camera view.
Oh,
yeah,
so sorry.
Here we can also turn it.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
this. There you go.
that's better. Thanks.
Hi, Zoomland.
Yeah.
Okay, awesome. So then after this project is over, the last quarter of the class will be focused on the Albuquerque City Nature Challenge. Maria already gave us a rundown of what that is. But basically, in addition to Albuquerque having a team, within that, we have a team from GES and biology. I assume that'll happen again this year, but
Yes.
at least it happened last year. And we have data on how, what type of data was collected by each of those teams. And the students are going to use that data to encourage some friendly competition between those teams this year. And then that will wrap up on April 29th, which is a Friday, with a booth on campus. We'll have some snacks and again, have their visualizations printed and displayed. And we'll try to get students and other people on campus to sign up and participate in the City Nature Challenge. So again, nothing yet, but if you want to follow them on social media, you'll be able to see the outcomes of what the students make in about a month or so. I think that's it. So thank you.
Maria Lane's critical cartography class and Desiree.
Hi, everyone. My name is Desiree Loggins. I'm a second-year master's student in the Geography and Environmental Studies department. And I'm also a project assistant for the Center for Community Geography. And sorry, my mask is making me breathe very heavy. And in that role, I supported a collaborative mapping effort in partnership with National Park Service, National Trails, and critical cartography students, in addition to a variety of other partners ended up coming along for the ride. And so the goal was, what we ended up doing is producing 2 story maps that were meant to be tools of engagement and education for community members to get them connected to El Camino Real de Tierra Adentro National Historic Trail. There's actually a trail that goes right through Albuquerque that you might have seen signs for. That is a sort of colonial era trail for trade that connected the US and Mexico. Next slide, please. And so the legacy and access to this historic trail, which is a clip from the story map that you can kind of see where it cuts through the US and Mexico, is managed by a big team of interpreters, historians, and data scientists that work for the National Park Service, National Trails team. And they came to us really wanting to engage students in their work, but also figure out, how can we better connect folks to this important trail that is maybe known historically, but people don't know if they can access it. They don't know what it really has to do with them today and now. And so they knew that they came to the center to figure out how we could figure out a service project that would benefit them, but also students. Next slide, please. And so critical cartography ended up being a perfect fit for them. And as Maria explained earlier, that class is focused on exploring the critical nature of maps, focusing on maps as tools of communication, action, and power, which would really let the students explore, how this colonial era trail has a complex history involving many different groups and really produce lots of different things on the landscape. And so what we did is spent half of the semester really what we did, the students and Maria ended up exploring critical cartography theory and also meeting with NPS staff to figure out, understand the background of the trail and what they might have to offer if we were to produce a product. And then on the second half, it was focused on actually putting together a product. And so students brainstormed and came within the sort of broader framework that the NPS team offered them, and decided to create 2 maps, one focused on transportation and one focused on agricultural development along the trail. And so they brainstormed about how to make this sort of inclusive and include critical elements like community participation, oral histories, and just acknowledging the different stories around the trails, some that may be more prominent and also some that have either been ignored or misinterpreted throughout history. Next slide, please. And so ultimately, it was really about making those connections, looking at the historical geography, how the landscape had changed over time, and figuring out how to tie them all together to tell this story in a way that is useful. And again, importantly, making those connections not just sort of metaphorically and in the imagination, but real connections with actual people, and also identifying locations along the map that community members can actually visit, like the Gutierrez Helper House, Martinez Town, place that you actually might have heard of. And so if you actually want to see these maps, they're complete and on our website, the Center for Community Geography, and also living on the NPS website. But if you want to just jot down a little tiny URL that will take you right to it, you can go for it. And I encourage you to really explore that. They end up being quite vibrant. Next slide, please. And so these are just the cover, I guess maybe not covers, but the starts of both of the maps. You kind of see how they go. We're really happy with how all of this came out, and it ended up sort of benefiting all parties. These were pretty big projects though, and so they ended up not being able to get complete in that first spring semester. And so my role, in addition to sort of helping facilitate communication, I wrapped these maps up in the summer by just working with NPS to add in some of their like look and feel elements, increase accessibility through things like alt text, and also just get to some of the things that students wanted to do but couldn't. So like adding in acequias so that these two maps could actually be tied together so that someone could explore agricultural connections and thinking about how acequias are important to that process, and then be linked into transportation because our waterways are really important transportation modes on the trail. And so by the end of it, when it was all wrapped up, we'd actually grown our partnership quite a bit, where in addition to we have NPS staff, students in the center, but also Aspire provided drone footage so that you can actually get a bird's eye view of the trail in certain areas. And also students from the agricultural practicum and sustainability studies offered some of their their oral history interviews with local farmers that talked about their agricultural connections along the El Camino. So they ended up being a quite dynamic story map that students got to sort of figure out what critical cartography actually is in practice. And then we have these really great maps that are on the NPS website for community members to understand and explore. So if you have any questions about these maps, you can reach out to myself. Maria Ramona is actually an author of the Traversing the Transportation map. So you can ask her about questions as well. And also explore, if there are other community partners out there that are interested in work like this, and we can also talk about partnering. So thank you.
Everyone for your great presentations. I think we can get a really good sense of what projects we fund, right? The student projects and the faculty projects. So we just want to highlight the opportunities and the upcoming deadlines for both students and for faculty who want to engage community, right? So April 4th is the deadline. So anyone that's interested in one of these fellowships is when we'll have the deadline. Okay, so since we've had the examples, I don't want to linger too much on this so we can get to the questions. Next slide, please. And we also work to support for community groups. So if you're a community partner and you want to find a classroom or students, do get in touch with us. We will help you with matchmaking or any ideas. If you have ideas, do get in touch with us. And so how can you contact us? Well, social media at NM Community Geog, and contact Dr. Maria Lane, and here's the email. And you can also email our center, the community email. So should I just open it up for questions, right? And also we want, if there are community partners here that we're looking for, students or or faculty or classes, anyone that has any questions for the speaker. So any sort of question, we don't have too much time. So open it up. Does any on Zoom? Yes. Zoom, yes. Do we have any community partners here, or are we all faculty and students? Okay, okay. Well, if you think of any project need that you want, do get in touch with us. How about students? Okay, well, and we think that we were opening up, we are allowing reapplications, right? Or Yeah. Okay, so hopefully you apply for our upcoming deadlines. Yes.
I have a comment or question. You guys work with people who want to volunteer or anything like that?
Sorry, with
With folks that want to volunteer
Yes.
Yeah, let's talk. Since, like I said, we're really new, we've been kind of just trying a lot of different things to see what is gonna work for us and be productive with our community building mission. So, yeah, I'd love to talk with you about that. Try something new.
This is very exciting. I started my career in GIS at UNM back in '88 and retired now. So it would be nice to pay back on it.
Okay.
Miriam, we have a question on Zoom from Alice Gomez. Alice asks, is there room for historic preservation in any of the projects?
I guess if they're working with community partners, then the project would be relevant and would be fundable.
I feel like my project is historic preservation based for sure. And I think a really big part of that is a lot. I don't know if they can hear me.
Can you hear Leah?
It's not very easy to hear her, no.
Do you want to come closer? I'm not sure where that mic is. I think up there. Yes, but here they want to see.
Okay. So I'm getting my certificate in historic preservation, and I feel like a big issue in historic preservation today is wanting to preserve a building instead of the soul or the techniques or skills that built that building. And so that's a priority for me in terms of like historic preservation of cultural landscapes projects, and yeah, preservation of skills and of community that is involved in it. Yeah, I don't know if there's anything more specific. that I
Is there
could talk to.
anything more specific? I think I saw it. Okay, thanks. Yes, okay.
Alice said she's getting her MS in historic preservation and would love to connect with Desiree. I will share Desiree's email to make that possible.
Yes, okay. Excellent. With Leah, maybe. Okay. Any other questions, comments?